Chapter 5. uh, Becky came back to town in time for her birthday. On Saturday morning, the town's children gathered at her house for a special party. Her parents had rented a ferry boat, and they had hired some people to look after the children. "You will be late tonight," said Mrs. Texture to Becky. "You'd better stay with one of the girls who live near the ferryboat landing." "I will stay with Sushi Harper," said Becky. "Very well," said her mother. "Be a good girl." Everyone was very excited as they boarded the ferryboat. A few miles from town, they went ashore. Then they had a delicious lunch. Tom spent most of his time with Becky. He soon forgot he was to meet Huck that night. The children played games and some of the boys went swimming. Then they were walked to McDougall's cave. They took a candle and began to explore its tunnels. Before long, they heard the ferry boat well. It was getting dark and time to go home. Meanwhile, Hook was waiting for Tom. It was late at night when he saw Indian Joe and his partner. They were coming out of the inn. Hook followed them. They stopped a few yards from Mrs. Douglas' house. "Judge Douglas put me in jail many times," said Indian Joe. "Now he's dead, and I'm going to take my revenge of his window." Hook was shocked. He leaned down the hill to the Welshman's cabin. "I need help," he called. "What's wrong, Huckberry?" said the Welshman. "It's Indian Joe. He's going to hurt Mrs. Douglas," said Hook. The Welshman and his sons grabbed their guns and ran to Mrs. Douglas' house. Hook stayed behind, trembling with fear. Soon he heard gunshots. When the Welshman returned, Hook asked, "What happened? Did you get them?" "No, they got away," said the Welshman. "But Mrs. Douglas is safe. You saved her life. You are a very brave lady." The next day was Sunday, and the townspeople gathered for church. Before church, they talked about Indian Joe and Mrs. Douglas. The criminals still hadn't been caught. After church, Mrs. Thatcher went to talk to Mrs. Harper. "Where's Becky?" she asked. "Becky?" said Mrs. Harper. "Yes," said Mrs. Thatcher nervously. Didn't she stay with you and last night?" "No, she didn't," said Mrs. Harper. Mrs. Thatcher turned pale. Just then, Aunt Polly walked over. "Good morning," she said. "Tom's missing. Did he stay with either of you last night?" Mrs. Thatcher turned even paler and fainted. The news about the missing children spread quickly. The whole town gathered to search for the missing children. They searched the cave and its tunnels for 3 days. Then someone found one of Becky's hair ribbons. "Is this all I have from my Becky?" cried Mrs. Thatcher. On the first day, Tom and Becky separated from the other children. They went deep into the cave that they didn't hear the ferry boat's bell. Then they were frightened by bats and ran into a tunnel. Soon they were hopelessly lost. Tom shouted. He hoped that someone might hear him. His voice echoed back through the tunnels and made a strange sound. Later, Their candle went out and they were in total darkness. Becky sobbed with fear. Tom gently put his arms around her to comfort her. By the next day, they were both hungry and frightened. Then Tom found a kite string in his pocket. Don't worry, Becky, he said. I will find a way out. He tied the string to a lock. Then he put one hand on the wall and began working. Soon, Tom saw a candlelight ahead. He shouted with joy. Then he froze. It was Indian Joe. What if he sees me? Thought him. Suddenly, Indian Joe began running away. He was frightened by Tom's voice echoing in the cave. Tom continued searching for a way out. On Tuesday evening, the church bells rang. They've been found, shouted the townspeople. Everyone gathered to welcome the missing children home. Tom told how he had searched the tunnels. I went to the end of my kite string, he said. Then I saw daylight. I looked out and saw a Mississippi River. Tom and Becky were tired from spending 3 days and nights in the cave. They had to stay in bed for days. 2 weeks later, Tom met Judge Tick in the street. Tom, I've put a big iron gate on the cave, said the judge. No one will be lost in there again, but Indian Joe's in there, said Tom. All the men of the town went to the cave. When they unlocked the gate, they found Indian Joe lying there. He had starved to death. Next day, Tom went to see Hook. Hook, I'm sure Indian Joe's treasure is in the cave, he said. How do you know? Said Hook. Just follow me and you will see, said Tom. The boys took a shovel, 2 bags, and a candle. They got into a boat and rowed to the cave. They tied their kite strings near the entrance and went in. Soon they found a huge lock. Hook! Cried Tom. Look at that lock. There's something burned on it. Tom, it's cross, shouted Hook. I saw Indian Joe holding his candle near there, said Tom. They started digging under the cross. They found some boards and pulled them aside. There was a wide hole behind them. Tom put his candle in and saw a small cabin. Some guns were in a corner and the treasure box was there. They went in and opened it. It was full of gold coins. We're rich, Tom, said Hook. This is too good to be true, cried Tom. Let's hide the treasure in the Mrs. Dogger's shed, said Hook. They put the treasure into the box and carried it to the boat. After the boys hid the treasure, they went to Mrs. Dogger's house. They were surprised to find many townspeople there. The people were waiting for Tom and Hook. The old Welshman stood up to speak. He told what Hook had done for Mrs. Douglas. Then Mrs. Douglas told them she wanted to take care of Hook. He will go to school and will never be poor again, she said. Hook isn't poor, shouted Tom. He's rich. Everyone laughed. Tom ran out of the room and returned with the heavy bags of gold coins. Half is Hook's and half is mine, Tom said. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then they all began to ask questions. Tom explained how Hook had found the treasure. When Tom finally finished speaking, the judge counted the money. There was over $12,000. The judge said that the boys should put the money in the bank. Tom and Hook agreed. and they decided that each would take $1 a week for pocket money. Hook stayed with Mrs. Douglas. He wore neat clothes, washed regularly, and went to church and school. After 3 weeks, he ran away. Tom went to the old house where Hook used to sleep. He found Hook there. Tom, said Hook, Mrs. Douglas is good to me, but I don't like that life. Come on, we've got those guns from the cave. Let's be lovers. Tom saw his chance. Hook, you can't be in my gang unless you're respectable, he said. A lover is more high class than a pirate. Hook thought for a moment. Okay, he said. Then I will go back to Mrs. Douglas for a month. Let's have our first gang meeting tonight, said Tom. We will share in blood to be loyal and never tell the gang's secret. That sounds a million times better than being a pirate, said Hook. I think I will stay with Mrs. Douglas forever. I will be a great lover.